So here they're going back to the main of the original loop. And there's the bundle of wires. So we're going to splice back into that main. You can see the layout here for the new irrigation, the new loop. With the new system on the new greens, we're going to have half turners in, half turner outs to try to micromanage the putting green itself as much as possible and still offer enough water for the bluegrass surrounds with the half turning out. Quick couplers are going to be 2 per green, kind of opposing corners, and this green will be where that gentleman's digging, the pink flag, and the pink flag here will be the quick couplers, and then around bunker edges, which is only one here on the green side anyways, is the tiny little pop-up heads to irrigate the faces of the bunkers that tend to want to dry out. So here you can see they use the fabric to ensure the material doesn't get kicked on in our new green, because the trench is going to be pretty close to the green cavity. Hand digging the new main in, the wires. See the tree roots that came in the green from the elm. Here's the new connection. It's going to have a locator wire. This gives you an idea. We're just backfilling just an inch to cover it for now as the first lift. All the tees face away from the green cavity. They're all push-on gasketed fittings, not glued, so they have a little give. They won't snap. Corners all have a thrust block. This another thrust block. So you have the half turners in to water the greens, half turners out. You can see went through the old system there. So the main loop for the irrigation for the surrounds is installed in the quick couplers. So now we're installing the small pop-up loop. What do they call those saddles, JD?
Blazing saddles.
Blazing saddles. So we're utilizing the trench that they used for the irrigation, the new irrigation loop, to drop in this poly pipe. Then we'll make our own swing joints with the funny pipe and reinstall the small pop-up heads to irrigate the bluegrass around the bunkers. So it's pretty sweet system. So we went with bluegrass for their surrounds with no fescue, and so that's going to need the most water in this whole green complex, and we don't want to get the bunker sand too wet, so these little pop-up heads are very important for this project. The red line here indicates the 5-foot wide collar that we're roughly going to maintain. That will be that collar will be grown on the native soil, capped with several inches of the sandy mix that we're going to also enhance with compost and biochar, dirty it up a little bit. So what Mike's doing here, he's making his final adjustments so these little pop-up heads are just outside the bent grass collar and in the bluegrass surrounds. So this nozzle will be basically throwing just out. I can keep documenting, but every bunker is washed out. Fines have washed into the sand. You can see that hue from the erosion from up above. The fabric did its job, but it's a limited job in its effectiveness when compared to the better Billy bunker. So every bunker is trashed. It's going to take hundreds of labor hours to fix it, and then when they're fixed, it's going to take several days, if not, maybe more than a week, to get it to settle back down and get playable at any kind of consistency. Well, this is really what we've been waiting for. This is really a good test. So if you remember, we took this bunker and with our own labor cleaned it out, refurbished the drainage system, and we split this bunker into thirds. You can see this third here, we used the fabric, and this middle section we used the capillary concrete, and then in this last section, last third, the billy bunker. So I think it's pretty easy to see how they all perform. This is a pretty severely flashed bunker. You can see the exposed billy bunker aggregate here. It's all glued together, so to speak, with a polymer. We used our local sand here, so this sand is a little more prone to erosion than the white silica sand. You can see the exposed capillary concrete, and then over here, of course, you can see the exposed fabric. So clearly the fabric helped, but when compared to the billy bunker and the capillary concrete, it didn't hold up nearly as well, and the capillary concrete sloughed some sand off, and the billy bunker very, very little. So this is a great side-by-side comparison here. So when the guys extracted the sand here from our test bunker, they broke through, but it's kind of interesting to see how the better billy bunker glues that top layer. So last year we did this little trial here where we tested several different sods, several different species of grasses in this sod. So we'll start over here. This is a bluegrass mix with turf type tall fescue. You kind of see the silvery sheen, coarser texture, a little taller grass. This is a bluegrass blend of one sod company. This is a bluegrass fescue mix from another sod company. This is another turf type tall fescue bluegrass mix, different than the first one we saw. And then this is another sod company's bluegrass blend. This is the one we picked right here to use around our greens. You can see it has a nice density, even stand. You can kind of see how the turf type tall fescue, the coarser blades are sticking up past the bluegrass blades. So what guys are doing, they're mowing this stand of turf a little tighter, a little lower, to try to compensate for this coarser blade from the turf type tall fescue. You can just see this much coarser blade here. Tough, really tough grass compared to, say, some of these finer bluegrass blades. So you can see there's a significant difference. And the tighter you mow this type of sod, this type of stand of turf, the more it favors the bluegrass. So what happens over time is this clumpiness starts to show and get worse over time as the bluegrass fights, I guess you could say, or competes with the turf type tall fescue. And you end up with kind of a clumpy stand of turf. Same with the fine fescue. Here you can see, you know, here where the fine fescue is kind of happier, where it's drier on the slope. That's one of the reasons why you want to use these fescues, whether it's the fine fescue or the turf type tall fescue, because you can reduce the water, which is wonderful. But you can see the bluegrass blades. In this case, it's the opposite. The bluegrass is a coarser blade compared to the fine fescue. And you can see how it's starting to clump out. So this is even more prevalent than, say, the turf type tall fescue with the blues. This bluegrass blend here from the sod grower just isn't performing very well for us with the varieties of blues. And then we're back again to the turf type tall fescue. You can see like this clumpiness of coarseness. So I'm very happy with the selection, which again is this blend of 3 different kinds of bluegrasses. It matches in well. It's not the dark green, blue-green, midnight-like varieties of bluegrass that you have to really hit hard with fertilizer and water and full sun. So as we're doing the greens, the other part of the project are the bunkers. We did these bunkers 15 years ago and they worked really well for us, but they reached their lifespan and we used the local brown sand with the fabric. This time around we're going to go with the Better Billy bunker and the best sand, white sand. So Rick Jacobson, our architect, drew out the bunker lines, the edges here. They're going to really be fun. So these are going to be more reminiscent of the way the old early 20s photos showed these bunkers. Kind of a fairly erratic edge, and but still some general weaves throughout. We're also trying to come out enough to get rid of this sand buildup from the creeping in of the bluegrass edge. So we're addressing that as well, bringing character back into these bunkers. It's going to be really fun. Rick is being conscious about the small pop-up irrigation heads that ring these bunkers. Here's an example of one here. So that's why he's kind of staying within the general footprint of the bunker. And he's also conscious about maintaining them. If these little waves were too erratic and too sharp, the way we will mow them would be really difficult. So there's still going to be some hand mowing there with fly mow type equipment, but overall fairly maintenance friendly. These guys make pretty fast work out of removing the old bunker sand. I got two guys detailing the edge, and the operator with a knuckle bucket, smooth bottom, focuses on the removal, and a couple drivers and trucks. Goes pretty doggone well. Well, you always, whenever you dig a hole, you run into surprises, it seems. So this is a nice 8-inch main line. You can see the water's running. This takes water from 3 green, down 2. So we're going to use these Ys and replace this section and connect a 4-inch to this, so it's a nice, smooth, proper connection. So if we ever had to rod this, the rodder would go through no problem. So we got to dig this out, clean them up, flush this pipe, and make the proper repair. A couple new sections of pipe, most of it we reused. Guy's doing a good job edging, went far enough back in all these bunker edges to get back to soil. A lot of sand buildup. So all the edging is done, the contour is done on the bunker. Drain tile pulled out, cleaned, freshened up, reused what we could. Trenches broadened up, and now we have the 2 inches of gravel being installed before the Better Billy bunker aggregate stabilizer polymer is sprayed on it. This has to be really, really dry, the gravel does, before the polymer is applied, but this is the next step in the bunker construction. So you can see you got one guy detailing the gravel, making sure footprints and whatnot are taken out to get a nice smooth finish. The other guy's maintaining the hose, and then the operator's moving the wand and the nozzle, applying. You can see how he applies the lip at the same time to stabilize the soil lip. So that's how it's done. Pea gravel's got to be really, really dry, and then ideally the 2 inches of gravel that makes up the bunker floor now, half of that gets glued together with the polymer, so the top roughly inch is cemented together, and then the bottom inch is all loose pea gravel. That's how the Better Billy bunker system generally works. Then when it's dry, they'll walk through the floor, and if there's any give whatsoever, they'll spot spray more stabilizer or polymer. If it's solid, then it's done, ready to go. So this green is ready for seed. It's got all the pre-plant amendments, rototilled in, soaked, floated out, starter fertilizers, sprinkler heads detailed pretty good at grade. As you can see how the sand ridge zone from the green meets the side. It's right at level, right at grade. It's like a perfect lip right there. The red flag there means a little pop-up head. That's for the that's to irrigate the bluegrass around. Here's one of the bigger heads that will be within the collar. You gotta remember, there's roughly a 5-foot collar here. So it's not exactly perfect, but pretty close. This head here is perfect. And so you got half turners in, half turners out. So to mow the green, half turner in, of course, half turner out will irrigate the surrounds. And then once that sand gets too wet from that type of irrigation, we supplement with the pop-ups, the bluegrass, because the bluegrass is going to probably need more water than anything around this green complex. Ideally, you want to manage the bunker sand, the bluegrass surrounds, and the putting green all differently because they all require different amounts of water. A little bit of a runoff in the front here, drain at the bottom. The approach here, all graded, amended with biochar compost, Miramichi's soil enhancer. That's the dark stuff. So this will all be raked with a Sand Pro before we seed this. So this is what it looks like. After we put the seed down in 2 different directions with a drop spreader, then we'll take the Sand Pro up here and dimple it. So this will look like that. This is still tire track from when we floated it. So this is what it looks like. Better Billy bunker gravel, all glued in. We'll bring the sand in later. The banks are all locked in. They're calling for rain Sunday. Today's Friday. So we have all the bunkers protected here. So what we did with our guys is we harvested the sod and the approach area on every green, and then the architect identified some of these fairway line tweaks. You can see here, for example, he's trying to bring the fairway turf further out in many areas near hazards, the bunkers themselves, just to try to bring these bunkers visually more into play. And that's just basically taking advantage of harvesting the fairway side here. This is going to be a fun improvement here. So as I mentioned earlier, our guys are going and harvesting the sod and the approaches. So for example, this red line here represents the area of influence. So all this nice sod here in front of the green is going to be harvested, then transplanted into areas like this that the architect identified. So if you're a real long hitter on this hole and you're a little bit right of center, there's a good chance your ball is going to roll and continue to roll, perhaps off into the rough. So the longer of a hitter you are on this hole, the narrower the target. Makes you think what kind of club you want to use off the tee, what's the conditions like, are the fairways running real fast and firm with lack of rain, is it windy? So that's the whole idea, is to have these options and have the golfer think his way through the game on club selection and target areas. This is going to be really a fun little tweak on this hole. When they built this green up, they really compacted and glazed this soil. So to help prepare for the seedbed, we're keep tining it. This will help fracture the soil, kick out rocks, identify imperfections where clay might be been deposited. Then we just go through with the Sand Pro with the little box blade and kind of make sure we tidy things up before the next rain. So basically deep tining it, skim coating off the clay with the Bobcat, and now box blading it with the little bar that's on there. little scarifier. Works really well. So this gill rake works pretty well also. After we go in here and solidify and aerify the soil, then we top dress it with a little bit of that sandy mix that we took off the top of the old greens. And this tool here kind of helps commingle the sandy mix with the native soil, level it, break up the clumps. Ends up being a pretty nice seed bed that then we'll feather in with the Sand Pro. And much like dimpling with the Sand Pro, we're drilling in the seed in these approaches with the Brilliant. So we first used the drop seeder, and then we went in with the, we pressing it in with the rollers on the Brilliant, and then JD will come and lock this in with the hydro mulch. So we're locking the approaches down in the runoff, the hydro mulch. We first allowed the POA to grow for several weeks, then we killed it with Finale, seeded it, and then locking the seed in. This should help insulate the soil, help from erosion, help maintain moisture. There's nutrients in there for the starter fertilizer. Should work pretty well. So the first coat, call it like the primer, it's got the biochar and the compost, the wood fiber, chip humate, that's the brown, and now we're going over the top with more fiber and tackifier, so that will create kind of like a crust and prevent the erosion at a higher level than just the brown primer coat. So you can see the verticutting, kind of a messy job as far as golf goes, but I think in some ways this is more valuable than co-aerifying, which is also a messy job. You can see Felix, we kind of got a homemade little drag mat there with just a piece of chain link fence. He'll go around a couple times trying to knock the soil off of the batch clumps to rework back in and get the organic matter to float. And he'll drag it one direction, turn around, drag it the other direction. And by then, I think that's about all that we can do to work it back in. That's going to also help stand this turf up to work this grain out and work the soil back in and be just left with all this biomass that will just blow off and then collect with the sweeper when we're done blowing it off. The first mowing is going to be a little messy. You got to wait for it to dry, especially on these dewy mornings, but and usually we just set two machines up and just take our time with baskets and mow them with just those two machines that don't have the verticutters on there. That takes a little bit of a beating, so it's all these things are kind of a little bit of a price to pay, but right now this is the best we can do in trying to manage the organic matter basically by removing it and working grain out of the fairways. So to help kind of feather in the new with the old here, we're overseeding the seam and several passes into the bent POA fairway with bent grass seed. We're using 007, we're using the same seed as we use in the approaches, 007 primarily with some flagstick, but the hope is that this overseeding process then will increase the bent population here with the same variety as that's what's planted in the approach, and kind of help feather in this seam so it's not just a straight line of a significant difference, both agronomically and visually. And this overseeder is just a wonderful tool that Wiedemann made. It's really sophisticated, it's computerized, really easy to calibrate, wonderful spiking. You can see the seed coming out and the air blower there that's blowing the seed down, keeping everything dry. It just does a wonderful job.